Hello, my name is Pam Wilson, and on behalf of Career Partners International, welcome to our 2012 Talent Management Webinar Series. At any time during the broadcast, if you experience technical difficulties, please call technical support at 1-888-259-8414. We've got a full house today with almost 800 global registrants, with participants from New York to Dubai. These webinars continue to grow and are designed to share ideas, thoughts, and best practices that demonstrate the impact an organization's talent has on its business performance. Today, we're going to showcase some practical tools that you can add to your own personal toolkit to enhance your success as well as the success of your organization. For your convenience, we're recording today's session, and we will share the link to the recording as well as the slides from today. We will also be conducting several polls during the session, and we invite you to participate. A little bit about myself. I'm currently Vice President, Client Relationships of CPI Chicago, Kensington International, and work with a wide range of clients providing talent management solutions in a variety of areas, including leadership development, succession planning, executive development, and team development, areas that are definitely related to our topic today. I'm very excited to host this event and be with all of you today. Career Partners International is one of the largest providers of talent management services, taking a holistic approach to managing talent throughout the career cycle. Owned and led by our 69 local partners around the globe, whose logos you see here, CPI has the largest footprint with more than 200 offices in over 35 countries. Whether assessing, engaging, developing, or transitioning talent, we take the time to understand and appreciate the difficult business issues our clients face, including retaining top talent, as you will hear more about today. From a best practices perspective and consistent with CPI's talent management model, pictured here, an organization's strategic objectives serve as the starting point for designing talent management strategies that really achieve results. This model simply depicts this concept and further demonstrates how business and talent management strategies are intertwined and influenced by an organization's culture and its values. While today's discussion will primarily focus on the quadrant of engage, you will see that talent retention is impacted by all the areas depicted as we discuss winning strategies to retain top talent. Again, thank you for joining us today. As you are aware, there is no bigger issue facing organizations today and in the upcoming years than retaining their top talent. It's critical to every organization's business success, as you will hear from each of our three panelists, who will share their perspective, insights, and success stories in retaining top talent. Our agenda today will include an overview of strategies that organizations are employing to retain top talent, the business case for retention, an overview of strategies that they are employing, as well as case studies by two organizations with very different business goals who will share their individual success stories and tips and techniques. We will save time at the end of the presentation to answer questions, so feel free to send those questions by clicking on the red arrow at the top of your screen to open up the control panel, and then click the question chat feature and type in that question. Our panel of experts today include Ron Streaker, Managing Partner and Practice Leader of CPI Atlanta, CMI International, Neil Mulkeen, Vice President of HR and Chief Ethics Officer of J.M. Huber Corporation, and Barbara Bose, Principal, CPI Winnipeg, Legacy Bose Group. I'll share a little bit more about their backgrounds later in the presentation. But first, we'd like to start our session by asking you a poll about what losing key talent would mean for your organization. Please respond by answering which of these that most closely reflects your organization's perspective. Would you define the potential loss as a crisis, a problem, a potential problem, or not a problem? And this poll will give us a perspective that's definitely global and fairly significant with the 800 participants I referenced earlier. Again, please choose one. If we look at the results, definitely more than half of you think that the potential loss of talent is a problem. Secondly, a potential problem. Third is a crisis. So hopefully as we move forward with our presentation, you walk away with some significant areas of how you might be able to overcome that in your organization. And now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ron Streaker. Ron is Managing Partner, as I mentioned, of Career Partners International Atlanta. He's been a senior member of various executive teams, a chief HR officer, consultant, an educator, and an executive coach. He's also worked globally. His experience spans a variety of industries, including financial services, healthcare, telecommunications, and education. He's currently a board of directors member of 3 separate organizations. Welcome, Ron.
Pam, thanks for that kind introduction. I'd like to start today with providing the business case for retention of top talent, and it's actually very simple. There are numerous studies and papers that reinforce the importance of investing in talent and how this investment pays large dividends. Even though Cotter and Heskett's study was some time ago, it remains a clear standard linking performance management initiatives to the bottom line. Additionally, companies have shown that a highly engaged workforce has a positive influence on both operating and net income. However, it's not all roses and sunny days. The Ian Hewitt study showed that employee engagement, retention, and motivation continue to lag worldwide. So as always, there's a lot of work to do. Therefore, what do we do? I wanted to begin our discussion today on retaining top talent by describing a few principles that I have found to be important regarding this very key area. A clear strategy needs to exist that links talent to the organization. It must be aligned with the business strategy and the business needs. Clearly, the CEO and the senior team need to be driving this process. It needs to be focused on the top talent throughout the organization. Participants need to own their own development, and finally, there has to be clear accountabilities for performance throughout the process. Leaders drive the process of talent retention. Bolton Associates studied the area of leadership development and found these areas to be especially key. Leaders are focused on addressing the business issues and challenges, communicating the vision and strategy and creating this alignment, which is so key, increasing bench strength and accelerating the development of high potentials, and then finally increasing the cross-organizational coordination and collaboration. And by that, what I'm talking about is that this particular process will infiltrate throughout the organization. And they found that certain leadership competencies were consistently lacking as well. Again, these areas are key not only for the individual but the enterprise overall. For instance, you can see strategic thinking, leading change, creating that vision, inspiring others towards change, and then understanding the total enterprise and how it works were areas for continued development. I particularly like this quote from Leslie Roberts, who's the CEO of the UK-based Wolverhampton Homes, that captures the importance of having the senior leadership involved not only in creating the vision for retaining top talent, but also setting the tone and role modeling expectations throughout the organization. As you can look at this quote, what Leslie is really saying here and focusing on is building that vision, showing employees and that she's living and breathing the values and principles of the organization, and of course encouraging staff engagement throughout the process, building that trust and understanding between herself and other leaders that this is a shared experience. These kinds of leadership things are particularly essential for retaining your top talent, and it really offers, I think, a clear example of good leadership. Which brings us to the key questions of all leaders must ask when they're putting forth time, effort, and money in retaining their key talent. Do we have the right talent in place for the next 1 or 2 years? What skills and competencies do we need driving out to 5 years? What are some of the business challenges that we're going to face in the next 5 years? And what are some of the skills that frankly are declining that we no longer need to develop? These again are very key business questions. As we move beyond the leadership role in retaining top talent, it's important to keep the following in mind, and that's organizational culture. These 3 areas are particularly important when creating a culture that's engaged and utilizes development as part of doing business every day. As you see, all 3 of these factors go to the heart of any business and require the context, the strategy, and effort of all involved to make it work. I have found that when these 3 factors are aligned, engagement, retention, productivity go way up. Now let's switch for a moment and look at the following survey results. During registration, you responded to the question, what is your organization's greatest challenge in retaining top talent? This slide shows the results of that question. Keep in mind, registrants could only choose one response. And as you can see here, career opportunities are clear winner, and culture. Emphasis here, 69% are on culture, work environment, and career opportunities. And then, of course, employee development really accentuates the majority of the responses. So again, we're really looking at a focus on the individual and how they can continue to grow and prosper throughout the organization. Let's take a look for a moment at best practices. One individual who has studied this topic for decades suggests the following for developing and retaining a key group in the organization. Ram Charan's focus is first on the high potentials throughout the organization, which demonstrates the importance of this group, and secondly, that these efforts are cultural. By that I mean that retention and development strategies must engage the entire organization and not just the senior leaders. There must be an effort to develop and retain top talent at all levels of the organization. In this way, the efforts are no longer associated to a class or group of individuals, but are focused on talent wherever they may be. He also makes a clear point about rewards and recognition, which reinforce the behaviors that are being developed for the long run. If you've not read this book, I would suggest picking it up. Jim Collins and his colleagues have been on the front lines of what makes organizations great for some time now, and their recent book clearly articulates how companies have remained competitive and productive even through the latest economic downturn. It's important to note that as you look at the key words of discipline, creativity, productivity, and ambition, they become a framework for talent development and a pathway for what makes companies great. Collins focuses on delivering a culture of discipline and then creating a context for creativity that leads to predictable and consistent levels of productivity, all complemented by high standards and, most importantly, emotional drive, which is that ambition. When your retention efforts are working, this is what it looks like. A model for looking at all this is illustrated on this slide. As you can see in the middle, the core of this development and retention model focuses on assessment, exposure, skill building, and coaching. The intention of the core is to show that these 4 factors are integrated into an individual's personal development with the complementary actions and activities around the core. Let's look at assessment for a moment. It's particularly important in this assessment phase that the individuals who you're looking at as high potentials and you're trying to retain in your organization have an understanding of what makes them tick through a personal assessment, and then they get feedback from the culture, if you will, through a 360 survey. So very key component in retention strategy. We then go to exposure, and exposure is really those opportunities through stretch assignments, which is real work. It's not something extra that they do, but is part of what they do every day. And then presentations to the senior management team, but also exposures to those lead endorsers, those people who will continue to make things happen for them throughout the organization. This is complemented by coaching, and coaching is the one-to-one coaching on those key areas that they continue to want to tweak and develop. It helps them, and again, in establishing those key sponsors throughout the organization, and most importantly, establishing that social map, which is that network, so that people understand what they're doing and continue to prosper. Finally, training and development comes in to complement the whole process in the development plan, where targeted skills that they need to continue to enhance are really isolated and developed. They may go to leadership forums to get some outside views, including external education, and again are tuned in to the top business topics so that they're informed and they know exactly the latest research and what's going on. So if you want to win the war on talent, you must engage in a process of culture building and formation that will be competitive in the marketplace, and most importantly be a place where employees will like to come to each day and thrive. As you see on this slide, culture is comprised of competencies, leadership, and skill building that results in the establishment of what is called an enterprise leader. And this is what the enterprise leader looks like. It's an individual who works comfortably across all aspects of the business, contains those key leadership skills of strategy, driving the business, and developing people, and then finally is able to manage the change process, that is internally and externally, as well as has the capacity to handle conflict and is adaptable to the changes in the business climate and market fluctuations. This is a very key component for continued development, but also retention of your staff. In summary, to win the war on talent, it's important to assess, engage, and then develop your staff with these following outcomes in mind. I know Stephen Covey said it many years ago that we need to start with the end in mind. When we think of retention and engagement through this lens and then build backwards, we find that our culture is comprised of these key outcomes pointed on the true north to success. It's linked to the business strategy, and the talent strategy is linked together. Identifying specific talent needs and gaps, and with true measurement that's also contained within this process tied to the business strategy. You've got a pipeline then of talent that continues to run through your organization. You reduce the time to fill these critical roles, which is tied to your recruitment strategy. You'll find that the diversity within your organization increases, and your labor costs will go down. And finally, most importantly, you'll have a competitive advantage in the marketplace, and it's been my experience that the word gets out. People understand and hear that this is a great place to work and prosper, and they want to be in your organization. With that, I'll turn it over to Pam.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate that overview that you gave us, as well as best practices. And clearly, one of the things that was a recurring theme was linking and talent retention strategy to business strategy. What we'd like each of you to do right now is think about your own organization, and please answer the poll question. To what extent does your organization's talent retention strategy link to your organization's business strategy? So please just choose one, whether it's directly linked with business metrics, not formally linked, no business metrics, not linked at all, or does your organization not have a talent retention strategy? So again, please choose one and put it in the context of your own organization. And we'll see how the results come up, and I'll share that shortly. So for the participants today, it looks like it's fairly even between directly linked, not formally linked, or does not have a talent retention strategy, with the majority of you having some informal linking of your talent management strategy to the business strategy. So as we move forward, we'll talk a little bit more about this linkage. And what I'd like to do now is take some time and look at some case studies, which will dive down more deeply into what Ron has shared. Our first case study will focus on the potential loss of high potential talent and creating an environment to be an employer of choice. At this point, what I'd like to do is introduce our next speaker, Neil Mulkeen, as Vice President of Human Resources for J.M. Huber, a privately held corporation with $1.5 billion of revenue, with over 4,000 employees, and in more than 20 countries. Neil has more than 25 years of human resources and labor relations experience in global manufacturing companies, and he's going to share some of the experiences that he's had over the last few years with J.M. Huber. Neil, thank you for participating.
You're welcome, Pam, and thank you for the introduction. As we look at some of the challenges facing our organizations today, we need to be alert to a number of things. One, that the recession has slowed voluntary turnover, but it did not eliminate it. Selective recruiting for key and critical roles is still ongoing, and your better employees are targets by your competitors and recruiting organizations. And even the economy being slow as it is, it's only masked the issue of baby boomers exiting the workforce. This is just a temporary postponement. The demographics there affecting our baby boomers has not changed. And depending on a company's culture and how employees were treated during the recession will influence their decisions to stay or leave. This gets back to that culture, it gets back to the work environment, and it creates an environment that employees have a choice, and they're going to decide whether or not they would like to stay or leave. As we look at those challenges, compensation and benefits help keep the organizations competitive, but that alone will not guarantee retention. And also having an attitude by your line managers that employees should be happy to have a job really does not work and is truly short-sighted. Retention of top talent as the economy improves will become only more acute as time goes on. As we all know, external recruitment is expensive, does not always guarantee the right experience and skills at the time when it is most needed. So what are employees looking for? Well, employees want to be part of an ethical company where their values are aligned. Today, ethics is back in fashion. Many organizations have this as a high priority. Every day in the paper we read about issues of ethics, and hopefully the organizations that you all represent are organizations of high ethics and the kind of place that people want to be attracted to and stay. Employees are looking for opportunities for growth and development, particularly employees early in their careers. A key retention factor is real opportunities, the opportunities to learn and develop. If you offer that, they stay. Quite frankly, if you don't, they go. Employees want to know that their contributions are appreciated and valued, and that's employees really at all levels. And employees who grew up in the me generation, they want to know what the company is going to do for them. They want to know, if I stay, what's in it for me. Also, perceptions in regard to development and opportunities will differ by generations. What is valued and what is important to perhaps employees later in their careers are very, very different than the younger generations who are earlier in their careers. And as we look at our organizations, and today many of our organizations truly are global, if you look at the organizations around the world, Europe's economy is relatively flat, projecting maybe a 1 to 2% growth rate at best. North America is coming out of the recession, but with sluggish steps forward. Growth is also slowing somewhat in China for organizations that have operations in China. However, those who do have operations in China know that employees with Western company experience and English language skills are targets for recruiters, and they have the opportunity to move to other companies in a very rapid way. Development programs need to be flexible. They need to be tailored to the cultural, regional, and economic differences for the organizations that we manage. A one-size approach does not fit all here. J.M. Huber Corporation, if we look at some of the actions we've taken that contribute to engagement and retention, one starts with our company principles. We have a sustainable culture that attracts and engages employees. Our company's principles are our global compass for all of our employees worldwide. Key to our programs is we have no artificial barriers that restrict development. Employees can move between occupational disciplines. They can move between business units. We have not put any artificial barriers up that suspend or hold back career opportunities. We look for opportunities for individuals to serve and lead on project teams. And it could be project teams that are not necessarily within a traditional discipline. We also look for stretch assignments that provide skills and experience earlier in one's career as compared to what they may have available at other companies. That is a key contributor to our retention, opportunities to get into real jobs, meaningful assignments earlier in their careers. We also have an appropriate mix of promotion from within and external recruitment as necessary. Our developmental approach overall is one of assessment, engagement, and deployment to meet both our business needs and our employee development needs. So with that, let me provide you with just one example, but this is a very real example in this case study. And this case study involves a greenfield plant, less than 4 years in operation. The plant during its 4 years had continuing operational and leadership challenges. And the organization recognized that sustainable change in performance will not come about unless we in fact put in a new plant manager with differentiated operational and people leadership ability. So we assessed the possible candidates, and we selected a high potential candidate where this would be a stretch assignment for this person. We provide that person with the appropriate support and coaching, and the understanding that this really was a stretch assignment, and it was developmental, and they may not come to the party with all the experience necessary, but it was a good situation and hopefully would provide the solution both beneficial for the company as well as the individual. This was a serious business issue that potentially could have caused continued operational problems and the lack of an opportunity for a hypo, the opportunity for that individual to perhaps leave. Well, this assignment was a successful assignment. Plant performance improved, downtime went up, plant-wide employee issues certainly were minimized. The employee himself benefited from an assignment that expedited their learning and provided an opportunity that would not have been available as earlier in another company. This particular individual served in that role for over 2 years, then moved into a commercial role for further development, then into an environmental health and safety role for continued development. This employee has been retained and has now worked in 3 of our major portfolio companies and continues to be developed for more responsible roles. Okay, this clearly was a win-win situation. Because of our development strategies, we have created an engaging environment that makes Huber an employer of choice. And I would ask all of those on the line to ask yourself that question: are you an employer of choice? We've also had sustained voluntary turnover at less than 5%, and this is during both good economic times and bad economic times. We look at the effectiveness of our recruitment and retention and development strategies. Upon retirement of our recent CEO, we've been able to replace internally our CEO, our CFO, 3 business unit presidents, key corporate staff, and multiple business unit leaders. Many of these positions were in addition, filled internally because of the development programs. We've minimized external recruiting and expense, and also the learning curve that goes with having to hire new people. We've aligned our succession planning with developmental programs to achieve our desired outcomes. And maybe most importantly, we achieve credibility with our employees that development programs are real and can lead to increased responsibilities. With that, Pam, I'd like to return it to you.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate the insights you provided, and I do want to note that there were a lot of examples that you gave, but it's clearly an initiative that really has been taken over many, many years. So it was not one program for a short period of time, but it's been integrated throughout the organization over a long period of time. So appreciate your insights. With that, what I'd like to do is talk about a second case study now that we've heard how one organization successfully implemented strategies to retain their top talent, we're going to look at this second study where it was mission critical to change their culture in order to increase retention and enhance recruitment efforts. With that, I'd like to introduce Barbara Bose as our next and final panelist for today. Barbara is principal of Career Partners International Winnipeg, Legacy Bose Group. She's an executive coach and consultant, as well as the author of numerous books, including a recent Amazon bestseller, Taming the Workplace Tiger, Powering Your Career to Roaring Success. Barbara will share insights on how one Canadian-based company retained a critical group of employees in a very tumultuous time. Welcome, Barbara.
Thanks, Pam, for that introduction. I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to present a success story of one of our clients. And as a matter of fact, it's a large public sector client. It's our City of Winnipeg Transit Department. Now, the Transit Department was confronted with two mission-critical issues. First, and it's been long-term, is attracting and retaining bus drivers. And then secondly, they were confronted by poor labor management relationships. Now, our city has 700,000 citizens and 1,000 plus bus drivers, or bus operators, they're called. And as you can appreciate, it's a city and a municipality, and so it still exists with a very traditional and bureaucratic and hierarchical organizational structure and leadership style. And so you can also expect that the relationship with the union, long-standing, is quite confrontational. So in addition to the issue of trying to attract and retain bus drivers, the City Transit Department was 24 hours and less than 24 hours away from a major strike shutting down all bus services in our city. Now, it was really kind of thankful, if we want to put it that way, that the director of the department was fairly new, and he recognized that the old way of working just wasn't taking them where he wanted to be. And he knew he had to do something dramatically different and implement a new business strategy. And so even though there was no budget to call in a consultant for help, he had heard about a participative, collaborative leadership and engagement of employees, and he wanted to try that. So he called in our company, Legacy Bose Group, to try and get to the bottom of problems and find a way to build joint solutions and improve the relationships. Now, I just can imagine the listeners can understand what a risk this was for this leader. He was new, and he was really going against the grain, if you want to put it that way. Now, from an assessment point of view, what we did was to go in and interview and focus groups and chats with the union and the management, and we identified from the management perspective that the biggest challenge was the recruitment and retention. And a key part of that was the scheduling. Bus drivers work for about 3 hours at a time and take an hour off and then work 3 more hours. It's very disjointed. But they were also concerned about driver safety and customer service, and they knew that they had poor employee communication. When we interviewed and did the focus groups with the employees in the union, interesting enough, we found that there was a lot of conflict between the union executive and their own members, and they just weren't listening to each other and getting along. So overall, we found a lot of low morale and general mistrust. But after a number of focus groups, and we had, out of 1,000 drivers, we had probably 10 or more focus groups, we finally got all parties to agree to 3 goals in terms of changing the culture. So let me show you those now. First of all, the groups agreed that they were going to create a new organizational culture, that new business strategy, and they wanted employee engagement and collaboration. They wanted to facilitate a culture shift from the command and control to a participative workforce. And from the command and control, I can tell you that they had annually 80 to 100 grievances. The third goal is they knew that they had to increase the bus operator retention, but also the recruitment and the productivity. And they wanted to do that by creating more of a motivated and committed workforce. So those goals, after several meetings, were what they agreed to. So our first job really was to engage the employees. How are we going to go about doing this? And we created a very unique situation where we created a neutral working group separate from the union and separate from management. Now, each group, management and union, had representatives, but we went out to the regular frontline workers and we had them nominate 7 members from the general workforce. Now, this committee acted as a steering committee and a working group to start investigating problems. And then, of course, there were so many issues that were prioritized that we ended up spreading out and creating additional task force teams. So eventually, we had quite a large group of employees involved in problem solving. So in essence, we got a lot of frontline bus drivers involved in stretch assignments, solving their own operational problems. The teams prioritized their concern, and they did research. In fact, we supported them going on some travel field trips to other cities to look at how things are done there. And then when they came back, they had to present their solutions to both the union and management and get approval of them all. And there were a couple of cases where they had to go out to the general workforce to get approval. We dealt with things that human resource people deal with and management deal with, the grievance process, how does it work? What's operator safety? Uniforms was an issue. Scheduling, as I mentioned, was a really big issue. And customer service and things like if there's a policy concern, how do they address it from an employee perspective? Now, another unique aspect of this project in the working group here was that this working group also set the criteria for 2 new leadership positions to help create the kind of culture that they want. Now, visible and active support from the executive level was very, very clear because there were 3 managers on that working group. Plus, they knew that the managers were being engaged in a 6-month training program. And let me tell you a little bit more about that. The 6-month training program that we implemented was focused on how to be a collaborative and participative leader. It was a 6-month program where we met once every 3 weeks with very, very specific goals, and they had to go back every week and practice what they learned. And come back the following session and tell us what they learned, how they applied it to their department, and how it worked. And so there was a lot of sharing going around. It wasn't rocket science in terms of the program. It was what is the leadership style, what is teamwork, how do you manage change, how do you supervise, all of those key things focus, though, on participation and collaborative leadership. Now, all of the working group, all the work that they did was really a training and development aspect for them as well. So we kind of hit 2 areas at the same time over a 6 to 10 month program. Let me just share with you, I'm still excited even after these number of months that away from the organization. I'm really excited about the transformation over the period of time that we worked with them. From the management level, there were 2 new people that were put on the management team, and our working group was actually part of the selection criteria and part of the selection process. And in addition, one of those team members, new team members, supervisors, was actually a woman because there was very poor balance between male-female at the management team. We also saw a new coaching approach to those disciplinary issues. And if you remember, I said we had between 80 and 100 grievances. So having the managers take a different approach was really quite remarkable. On the operations side, we identified the issues, prioritized the issues, and we worked through all of the operational issues together and resolved most of them. Comprehensive communication strategy, again, it wasn't rocket science. There was intranet, bulletin boards, and just the effort and the initiative to communicate with employees. The union executive, we didn't work directly with the union executive at all, but we saw, as a result, improved relationships between the union members and their own leaders. And of course, there was a really, really big improvement in the management-union relationships altogether. So let's look at the 1-year results. Really happy to say we did some metrics, we did focus groups, and we did hardcore research in terms of what were the improvements. And the applicant rate, people who are applying for bus drivers, increased by 14%. And as Neil was saying, word gets out on the street that this is a good place to work. And so we're seeing an increase of 14%. These bus drivers have to be trained, and it's very extensive training. So if they leave, the costs of training are soar. And so we found that the retention stayed, training costs were significantly reduced. We cleared up 100% of the employee grievances, and within that 1 to 18-month period of time, there were 0 new grievances. Now, the metrics came from the department statistics. The other thing that came out of this was the fact that people, employees, union, and management really got a clear grip on what are their boundary issues. And so that really helped the working relationship overall. So it was a very effective study and project to show that employee engagement really truly does pay high dividends even in a public sector organization. And I want to close by saying I see this client as a really good example of how an organization strategy that makes sure you focus on what's the business strategy and what's important to business, but what really getting people involved personally, it works. And now, after 18 months, I've met with my managers as recently as 2 weeks ago. That culture change has been sustained. And the fact that they were able to sign a new union agreement without any problem at all is really significant. So Pam, I'm going to turn it back over to you. This was an exciting story.
Thank you, Barbara. We appreciate the insights you provided. And I find it interesting when we talk about top talent, high performers, high potentials are definitely in the forefront as we talk to clients and organizations about top talent. But clearly, their top talent also includes individuals that have specific skill sets, like the bus drivers that were so critical to the success of the culture change in the organization that Barbara just talked about. As we move forward, we'd like to have our final poll. And we see a lot of organizations that look at their reward systems for retaining talent. But in this particular case, what we'd like you to do is please choose the top 3 strategies, excluding reward systems, that your organization uses to retain talent. Again, please choose the top 3: engagement initiatives, stretch or alternative assignments, executive coaching, positive management relationships or exposure to senior management, training and or professional development. If you can just take a minute and pick the 3 that are the top strategies for your organization. We'll get a good composite of what's being done on a global basis with the almost 800 people that have registered. And I think you've all heard each of these strategies applied in the examples we just heard. Oh, overwhelmingly, it looks like training and professional development is the top strategy, followed closely by positive management relationships or exposures to senior management. Stretch and alternative assignments and engagement initiatives are fairly close, and organizations don't seem to be using executive coaching quite as readily. So hope you found that useful. As we move forward, I'd like to thank our presenters for a comprehensive look at talent retention. And now what we'd like to do is answer some of the questions that have come in over the course of the last 45 minutes. If you've got a question and you haven't yet shared it with us, please type it in the question box. Again, you can access that by clicking on the red arrow at the top of your screen to open the control panel, and then click the question or chat feature and type in your question. I've got a few that I've already got that I'll share right now. This first one I'm going to ask Barb, because I think this relates to your conversation, Barbara. When you first did the employee focus groups, did you find that the employees tended to be skeptical?
Yes, Pam, I really did. Because of the very poor working relationships between the union management and union and management, and besides the fact that no one had ever gone to the front line and asked bus drivers what were some of the obstacles and barriers that they were confronting in their workplace, never in the history of the organization. So they were very skeptical from that point of view, and also from the point of view of the union management, the traditional relationship. So there were a couple of fellows in the session that, were sarcastic, bordering on rude, and sort of making inappropriate comments, and even voicing objections. So I actually pulled aside two of the people who were causing the most problem, along with the union president, and we had a little huddle and helped them to understand that, yes, this was the first time, but managers, the new management team, was serious about getting to the bottom of the issues that they had. And after that, he could see that everybody was participating, that we were taking issues seriously. So that was the very first meeting. And we had invited about 50 people, and 30 showed up. The next meeting, we invite 50 people, we got 50 people. So word traveled very quickly that the organization was finally ready to listen. So it was a good situation, although it was difficult to handle at first.
Well, and it seems as if, as you moved forward, you were able to initiate some change within the organization, and I'm sure that helped reinforce what you did at the beginning.
Yes, it certainly did. The trust was so important to build right away.
Thank you. The second question that I've got here that's come in looks like this is for Neil. Neil, your organization has done a significant amount of development for your employees. Since development can be so costly, how have you been able to keep it in your budget, especially during tough economic times?
Well, that is a real dilemma that we all face during budget-cutting exercises and some of the economic things we've been through. I think what it comes down to is you have to fight for those dollars to keep them in your budget. And decision makers need to be reminded that an organization's continued success is contingent upon having a trained and retained workforce. So cutting budgets without careful consideration could be a little short-sighted and ultimately impact the organization's ability to perform. So certainly organizations have to be very careful in cutting those budgets, and those who are responsible for those budgets really have to be prepared to fight for them.
And I think we saw some good case study numbers that help individuals be able to do the business case to support that too, I imagine. The next question that we've got here probably can be addressed by any of our panelists, but I'm going to ask Ron to answer this first, I think. Employee development seems like a key retention strategy. We offer a lot of training for employees, but don't feel like they necessarily take advantage of everything that's offered, or that we directly link it to our retention. What tips do you have for us to better do both of those?
Pam, I think a key component here is somewhat related to what Neil was just saying, and that is we have to work smart. And I think the best way to work smart in this particular area is to work through your management team. And oftentimes it's the managers who best understand what are the needs of their employees, and it's that working relationship that is so key. And then offer very targeted training opportunities for these individuals tied to a development plan and accountability. So the point I'm making is that instead of doing some broad-based effort that may hit a certain segment of the population. We really try to tie it through the management team to targeted needs of the individual. And when those needs are being met, it's been my experience, and the research does show this, that retention goes way up, and frankly, so does productivity. So I think a key component here is to really focus it on the right group for those right needs, and then tying in accountability. I think that's also very key.
Thank you. Neil, from a VP of HR perspective and the work that you've done, is there anything else that you could add to Ron's response?
I think, Pam, one of the key things, a key word I would say here probably is awareness. You can't assume that your employees know about the programs. You have to continue to market or communicate those programs. You got to make sure that awareness is there and continue to work at it. And if you link those programs and make your employees aware of them and show how they link to developmental assignments and see the success stories in the organization, I think that will help drive the desired results. But I think the key word here is continued awareness.
Okay, thank you. I've got another question. Neil, I think this relates to you as well. You mentioned that employees are looking for appreciation and value of their contributions. What specifically did J.M. Huber do to create that environment of appreciation?
That's a great question, Pam. We thought we were doing a great job. And we do pulse surveys with our employees to ask them what are they concerned about. And one of the findings in our pulse surveys was our employees told us that they thought we did not provide enough recognition. So we actively use the pulse surveys to develop programs. So one of the initiatives we launched after that particular survey was more recognition, not just corporate-wide programs, but programs within business units, down at the plant levels. We made it flexible where the plants could decide what's appropriate for them or business units. So it was not a top-down, one-size-fits-all. However, we did set a standard that we wanted recognition programs to be enhanced. We wanted both teams to be recognized. We wanted individuals to be recognized. We wanted to see perhaps growth in recognition programs. But we wanted to leave it flexible so each of the business units and plants and work locations can determine what was best for them and what motivated their employees the best. But clearly, again, here's another, it gets back to awareness. We thought we were doing a great job in that area, but our employees told us that, no, we're not.
Thank you. What's interesting is probably links into this next question, and any of the three of you can respond to this, but the webinar referenced quite a bit of research which links better performing companies to engaged employees. We find it overwhelming to address engagement given 4 generations in our workforce. What suggestions would you have for us to begin to address this and the unique needs that come up with that many generations in the workforce?
Let me speak here a little bit, Pam. What I find is interesting with the younger folks coming in is that they lack a little bit of patience, and they don't see the longer-term vision of a company. So I really like to be able to help them understand the whole dynamics of the company, where they're going, where they fit, and where they can go in their career, and the fact that they do need to have exposure to a number of different areas. And I always laugh because I had one young man, he passed his probation at 3 months, and he said, okay, when am I going to get promoted? They just don't understand the dynamics of an organization. So I often will focus some of the early training on that kind of orientation.
Okay, thank you. Ron, your perspective?
Pam, yeah, I could just add a comment to that and what Barbara was talking about. I think a lot of times one way to look at this, because it is so cross-generational, is that oftentimes people have different values in each of those generations. And yes, they believe it, they live by it, it's important to them. But at the same time, every company has a value statement or a series of values that they believe in. And try to find what are those commonalities between the generations. In other words, what is it across each of the generations that that they do believe in a common way that is matched to the company values. I think that is a good way and a good place to start. And then what you do is try to find a way to engage everyone around these commonalities, because, again, what I'm finding is that skill building and development is very important for retention and engagement. But what people believe in and what drives their behavior is so essential to them coming back every day and getting excited about their work. And I think what tends to happen at times is that we get at odds with our generational differences and what we believe in. And what I'm simply suggesting is a way to find some commonalities across these generations tied to the value statements of the company, and then working towards that, towards a common cause.
Thank you.
Pam, I agree absolutely with Ron's comments. I think these values and motivations are clearly different by generations. And one of the things I would recommend to those on the call is evaluate supervisory and management training so that the leaders in the organization are alert and keen to the differences. What's appropriate for younger people earlier in their careers versus perhaps individuals later in their careers. It is very, very different. The reward systems, what their expectations are, what flexibility they want in their job working relationships. These are all very different. They're different, and I think for senior leaders to understand the perspective of younger employees, perhaps younger new supervisor managers, to understand the value sets and the motivations of perhaps older employees, very, very critical. So you can't assume that people understand the differences. I think there really has to be training and sensitivity to those differences, because they do matter.
Thank you, Neil. Right now, that's all the time we have for questions. I know there's several other questions that we have that have come in, so we'll make every effort to get those answered offline if it was not already been answered. In summary, the best practices and case studies we just heard clearly reinforce that effective talent retention strategies must make it matter to the business. It's tied to business income, or tied to business outcomes, and I guess income, whether it's group training initiatives for bus drivers or individual coaching and stretch assignments for high potentials. Make it strategic. It's aligned with a business strategy, meaning it supports the organization's business objectives and helps the organization achieve those. It's embraced by everyone, but most importantly, it has executive team support and sponsorship. And the results can be and are measured for impact. And finally, it must be personal. As Neil said, one size does not fit all. So in addition to meeting the needs of the organization, each individual employee's need must be met so that they engage and actively learn and apply that new knowledge within their organization. Appreciate your participation, and on behalf of Career Partners International and our panelists, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found this session informative and helpful. Today's session was recorded and will be available within the next week at www.cpiworld.com/webinars. Your local CPI representative would be happy to provide additional information on today's topic. Your feedback is very important and ensures that our future webinars continue to be relevant and can add value to you and your organization. As you're exiting today, the exit survey will open in a separate browser on your computer. We hope you'll complete it. It is also where you will request your certificate of completion for HR recertification credits for attending today's seminar. We will email the recertification credit certificate to attendees who stayed on for the full presentation and answered yes to the exit survey question regarding the recertification credits. The next webinar in our series will be held in the fall, so please be on the lookout for your invitation. Until then, have a great day, and thank you for joining us.